This is going to be sort of a quick introductory video to help you with this assignment. So the very first thing, you need to launch Photoshop. So I'm not going to show you all the things you can do. Instead, you can go ahead and play with that and figure that out on your own. But I'm going to show you just enough of what you need to be able to set up your document and get it started. So here we have Photoshop, and I need a picture. And I'm going to go ahead and use this little guy down here that a photo that I took a couple years ago now when I was working with Rice. Or studying at Rice would be more accurate. So I've got this little bug here. A photo that I'm quite fond of, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. So your goal is to end up with a document that looks sort of like this. Let's just take a look at what we have as the example on Canvas. So this is your aim. So the very first thing is we need to make this into a 3 by 3 grid. So we have 3 pictures by 3 pictures, which 3 times 3 is 9. So that's how we'll get our 9 pictures to edit. So there are different things you can do. So I mean, the most obvious thing is we need this to be bigger, right? So if we do canvas size, we can make our canvas size bigger. Right now this is set to relative, but I'm going to go ahead and take that off. I could multiply this by 3 and multiply that by 3, but that requires math. And sure, math's good, and I've got a calculator here, but I don't have to do that. Photoshop makes it easier. I can go to percents. So even better. So if I want it to be 3 times whatever it is now, then I want it to be 300% of its current size and 300% of its current height. So width and height at 300%. And now I've got this canvas here that's 3 times its size. Now the next thing that's obvious is I need 9 versions of this picture. So I could duplicate this 9 times. And that would work. But the problem is, if I try to move this layer, where's my other picture? Well, it's here, but it's behind this white because of the order I did things. So I could go in and I could erase the white on each one of these. I could grab my magic wand, click and delete, and now you can see the one behind it, but that's an extra step, and that's kind of annoying to have to do that. And if I'm not careful, like I missed because part of it was off of the board, then I have to do it again. And that's just kind of lame. So what I can do instead is, if I had thought about it a little bit better before increasing the canvas size, instead I would go back to the start. So here's my history window. I'm going to go back to when I first opened it, right here. And I'm going to duplicate this 9 times. So 1, 2, and I could give these names, but it doesn't really matter right now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just a quick activity, a quick exercise. So let's see, we're at like 8 now? Yeah? 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The numbering's a little bit off because this first one's called the copy, but I already have the original. And that's fine. So now I can go into canvas size, and I can switch this to percent, and I can make this 300 and this 300, and boom, there we go. Now it looks the same, right? But if you notice these little thumbnails, you see the little checkerboard pattern? Compare that to the white here. This checkerboard pattern means that that is transparent. So now I can click and I can drag this, and look, no obnoxious white in the way. And now I can drag the next one, but if I click, it's still dragging the same one, even if I click here. So you used Illustrator before, and Illustrator is object-oriented. If you click on this object, that becomes whatever you're clicked on now. That becomes your selection. But Photoshop is not object-oriented. Photoshop is pixel-based, and it is more of a layer-oriented. So even if I click here, I'm still on this background layer. So I have to actually click on this background. Well, it's not really a background, but it's called that. I have to click on this layer, and then I can move this image. I have to click on the next one, and then I can move this image. I can't just grab and click. It's going to be the same one that I already moved, so I have to do that each time. So click the next layer, move it. Click the next layer, move it. And all the way down. Now this part might confuse you a little bit, because if you don't grab this one, if you try to move the background instead, it won't let you because it's locked. Let me fix that. So you have two choices. You can either unlock the backgrounds, which it won't let you in this version. In the newer versions it can. But it's not even really a problem because we don't have to move the background. We can move this one here. And if you ever if there's ever a time where you have to do something with the background, instead of trying to unlock it, which I think there actually is a way in this version, but why bother dealing with that? You can just duplicate it. You don't even need the background. And if you really need to, you can just delete the background once you've made a duplicate. So, no worries. Look, there's that checkerboard again, so invisible. So if I save this, like this is a PNG, then there won't be a center image there. But you need a center image because you need to use different filter effects. So we've got some options here. So right now, these are all just regular layers. And what do I mean by regular? Well, there's two types of layers. Well, actually, there's more than that. But for right now, let's just say you've got your regular layer, or you can convert it to a smart object. And why does that matter? It matters a little bit. So the next step is to use filters. So if I use filter gallery on this, just find some random one. Each one of these has more choices, so there's quite a few things you can do, like paint daubs. Look at that. So yeah, there you go. But if I do that on this one, the one that I did convert to smart objects, let's see what happens. So I go to filter gallery, and just apples to apples, we'll just choose paint daubs, even though you have to choose a different one for yours. Now when we do it, we have this thing down here, this smart filter. This is a mask, and we'll talk more about masks later. But the important thing to know is that when you click on this, you're editing the image. But when you click on this, you're editing the mask. And when you edit a mask, anything inside of this little area that is white is affecting or is showing your image. So in this case, it's only affecting the filter. So it's going to show the filter or not. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger by pressing the right bracket. And if I color this in with a black brush, this is kind of a special brush. Let's go to a regular brush. Wherever I color, that filter effect disappears. And you can see the black there. Let's increase the opacity, because you could still see it a little bit, right? Because it was sort of in between. It wasn't full opacity. If I make it a gray, it's affecting it a little bit, but it's not as intense as it was before. If I switch these, see, now it's more intense. So it's affecting this filter. It's showing the filter, the new effect that I created, where there's white, and not showing it where there is black, as you can see. So that's kind of the thing to know about smart filters. And the smart filters only happen if it's a smart object. Otherwise, it is actually modifying these pixels. These pixels have been modified by that filter. They have been changed by that filter. The original pixels are gone unless I go back into the history. Once I save this, those pixels are gone. The nice thing about the smart filter, so like, why do we care about this, is these pixels are not gone. They are still there. Just this filter is on top of it. So if you're working on this or whatever, and you think you have this really great idea, and you go use a smart filter on it, and maybe you're really tired or something, you come back the next day and you're like, what was I thinking? It's okay. You just got a smart filter. You can get rid of it. You can change it. You can only show certain parts. But if you've done a filter on the real thing, those pixels are done. There's no way to get that back if you have already saved and closed it and lost your history. Also, your history in Photoshop only goes back so far. It only goes back however far you have set it in the preferences. I think it's in the preferences. It's somewhere. It's probably general. Or interface. File handling. Ah, there we go. Performance. So history states. So you can add more if you want. Like you can add a ton. Although that does eat up a lot more RAM because it's time to remember all that stuff. But yeah, the default is 20. So if you do 20 things, like right now I can go back to before I did that. But if I just go to town and I start working on this, yeah. Oh no, go back, undo. If I go back and I just start clicking away, look, the history is changing and what was up top is gone, and I can no longer actually get back to before before I did that. So those pixels are done. The only thing I can do now is go back to the very start, but that's not what I want either. So just be aware of that. That's one of the advantages of using masks, and we'll talk more about masks later, don't worry about it. But you can see some advantages. So yeah, that was a nice little caveat, a nice little tangent note here. But anyways, so that's what you need to do. So you can play with filters and try out different things. Now, some of the filters are affected by what colors you have. So like right now, if I go into my filter gallery, most aren't, but some are. So like if I do neon glow, it's green and blue. It's kind of a little interesting. I can see the little guy in there. I can change the glow color like so, and I can change the glow brightness, and I can change the glow size. But that green, where is that green coming from? That's pretty cool looking actually right now. That green is coming from here. It's coming from my foreground color. This is foreground, that's backgrounds. If I change this, and now I go into my filter gallery, and I go back to neon glow blue. If I change this to red, so that way we're seeing it how it was again. See, so now it's blue where the red was. Some filters take both your foreground color and your background color into account. Well, let's see if I can remember one that does. I think Chrome does, which is in here. Chrome does not. Plaster took the foreground color, and I think this white is from that. Let's change the background color and see what happens. Let's go with like a bright magenta. So I go to filter gallery, and I go and find the, was it plaster? Yeah, I think it was plaster. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it's using the blue from foreground and the magenta from background. So that's just important to note. And of course each one of these has different settings that I can use to play with different things, decide how much you like or not, how smooth or sharp. And each one of these has different settings. And you can even add extra filters. So you can have one filter, instead of having to do it like press OK and do it again, you can add multiple filters to the same one and have different effects, which can start to look pretty cool sometimes, depending on what you do. Filters are only so cool. No one's going to mistake this for a real photo, obviously, now, but there's some cool things that you can do with it. So yeah, so you get the idea. So that's what you need to do for all of these. You need to choose a different filter for each one, and then when you're done, you need to save it as a PNG or a JPEG to be able to upload it. Now, if you're not done in class is over, you need to save as a PSD file. Saving it as a PSD file keeps all of your layers here. If you save it as a JPEG or a PNG, your layers disappear and it becomes flat, because JPEGs and PNGs, they don't have those layers. It's one flat file. If you want to be able to edit again, save it as a PSD file. Now the PSD file you won't be able to upload to Canvas because I told it not to let you. So you have to upload it as a JPEG or a PNG. So in Illustrator you did file export. So what do you do in Photoshop? Well, if you remember, Illustrator was vector format. Vector and raster are different things, if you remember. A JPEG and a BMP, a JPEG and a PNG, BMP as well, but we're not really worrying about those. A JPEG and a PNG are bitmap files, raster files, which Illustrator is not. So to take an Illustrator file and make it into a raster file, you have to export it. However, Photoshop is already pixels. If we zoom in a whole bunch into my little friend here, you can see the pixels. You can see the little pixel grid. So you don't have to export because it's already pixels. You just have to save it in the right format. Now, on the other hand, if you wanted to save it as a vector file, you can't in Photoshop by saving. You would have to export it. And it probably wouldn't really look very good anyways because you're making it with pixels majority of the time. So for a JPEG or a PNG, you're normally going to go to save as opposed to export. So you want to do save as most of the time and find your JPEG or PNG option.